Hi, everybody. Welcome back. This is part 4 of the lymphatic system and the immune response. And the last time we left off talking about complement fixation and how we are able to use that to determine whether a patient has been exposed to a certain antigen or not. Now, remember, complements can only be activated when you have an antigen antibody complex. So you have to have a coupling of the antigen and the antibody, and then the complement is activated. All right, let's talk about another chemical that's part of the innate immune response called interferon. But before we can talk about what interferon does, I just wanted to tell you a little bit about viruses. Viruses are non-living. They are basically genetic material. It can be either DNA or RNA, and they are wrapped in a protein coat. And that's all that there really is to a virus. Viruses don't have any cellular organelles. Viruses don't have any mitochondria. They can't produce ATP and they cannot perform protein synthesis. So what they need to do is invade a host cell, hijack the host cell's cellular machinery, and create more little viruses that will then burst forth from that host cell, killing the host cell, and that are then available to spread out and invade more cells that are in the body. So a cell in our body that is invaded by a virus pretty much has no hope. Like, it's going to die. But what it does is it secretes a chemical called interferon, which will protect its neighboring cells within the same tissue. So here's what interferon does. Interferon is released from an infected cell and it binds to the receptors that are on its neighbors, on the adjacent cells. That binding of interferon to those receptors stimulates the cells to produce an enzyme that interferes with or blocks replication of viral genetic material. If the virus can't replicate, then it cannot spread to other cells that are in the body. Another thing that interferon does is it promotes synthesis of MHC proteins. MHC stands for major histocompatibility complex proteins. These are proteins that are displayed on the surface of all of our body cells that label our body cells as being self, as being a part of us. It is what makes my cells different from your cells. And it's going to upregulate or increase the amount of MHC proteins that are found on our cells. And what that means is that it's also going to increase antigen presentation. So remember those dendritic cells that we talked about a little bit ago? And I said that it takes a part of the antigen and it displays it on its cell surface. Well, that little fragment of antigen is actually attached to an MHC protein. And so by increasing the amounts of these proteins on these antigen presentation cells, you are increasing the instances of antigen presentation and thereby escalating the adaptive immune response. So that's going to promote the immune response, and altogether it's going to help reduce the spreading of the virus. All right. I also talked a little bit about fever as being a part of inflammation, but instead of just causing a local heat, local heat production, fever is going to be a rise in temperature throughout the entire body. And so there are a couple of things that I need to explain to you before I can really get into like what a fever is. The first thing is that the hypothalamus is the temperature control center of the brain. So that's number one. So let's take a look at my little boxes here. First of all, I've got pyrogens, which are exogenous or endogenous. Pyrogens that are exogenous could be some kind of molecule, an allergen. It could be a toxin that's produced by a bacteria. It's something that is going to cause fever to occur. And we call these pyrogens, pyro for fire. These are things that are going to cause an increase in body temperature. But some pyrogens are endogenous, which means that they are being made by our own cells. All right, another molecule that I just wanted to revisit were prostaglandins. So remember that prostaglandins are hormones. They are made by tissues that need them. They are going to help the healing process. By communicating by allowing for communication in between cells. They cause pain, they cause fever. And now that we know those things, we can now start the story of what a fever actually is. So one pyrogen that is made by cells that are damaged by infection is called interleukin. And when interleukin enters the bloodstream, it travels to the brain and it causes some specialized cells that are found in the third ventricle to release prostaglandins. The prostaglandins travel through the capillaries and they stimulate neurons that are found in the hypothalamus to raise the set point. So what that means is that when there are prostaglandins that are found in the bloodstream, then the neurons in the hypothalamus stimulate the hypothalamus to raise our internal temperature from normal 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit or 37 degrees Celsius to raise it up to a higher level. So when the hypothalamus says, okay, body, your new temperature that you need to maintain is now 100.3 instead of 98.6. So that's going to cause us to do a few behaviors here. First of all, it's going to cause us to shiver. The contraction of our muscles are going to generate ATP and it's going to generate heat, not ATP. It's going to generate heat and cause our internal body temperature to rise. It's going to require us to maybe put on some more clothes because we feel cold, or to put on a blanket, turn the thermostat up. All of those things are going to help us to raise our body's temperature to the new set point, which is higher than normal. That is what a fever is. Now, fevers that are low grade are beneficial to the immune system because by increasing the heat inside of our body, or increasing the temperature inside of our body, we're actually increasing the metabolic rate of our cells. And so proteins that are needed in order to fight off the infection are going to be made at a faster rate. If the infection is bacterial, another thing that an increased body temperature does is it stimulates our spleen and our liver to hold on to iron and zinc, which are necessary for bacteria to divide and replicate and thus spread. So by increasing our body's temperature, we are inhibiting the spread of a bacterial infection. But of course, if your fever is very high and if it is present for a prolonged period of time, then that is not good for your body, because now instead of promoting the synthesis of necessary proteins, you are now denaturing and destroying those proteins, and that could lead to systemic or widespread tissue death. So low grade fevers are actually good for our body, while ones that are high and sustained over a long period of time can be very detrimental. So a lot of times people will pop a couple aspirin in order to lower the fever. And the reason why aspirin works is because it reduces the enzymes that are required to produce prostaglandins. And if you reduce the amount of prostaglandins in the blood, you're reducing the stimulus that is sensed by the hypothalamus to reset that set point to a higher level, and therefore your fever is reduced and your body temperature goes back to normal. All right, well, that is it. Thank you so much for watching all parts of this lecture, and I hope you have a great day. Bye-bye.